The smell of rosemary chicken and buttered rolls curled through my kitchen like an invitation to forgive. I'd spent the morning polishing the old oak table my husband and I bought the year our son was born, buffing out water rings and ghostly scratches as if I could rub time into kindness. Now the candlelight softened the edges of everything: my daughter-in-law's glossy smile, my son's nervous patter, my grandson's chubby hands banging a spoon, until the evening felt almost ordinary. Almost. I reached for the salt, and that's when a faint glint caught my eye beneath the table runner. At first, I thought it was a stray sequin from the napkin rings, but the glint blinked, a rhythm too deliberate to be a reflection. I lowered my hand, steady as if I were checking the table leg, and lifted the hem of the runner with 2 fingers. Taped to the underside of the table, my table, was a tiny black dot with a pinhole mouth. The blink was a heartbeat of red. A microphone, no bigger than a pea. I held my breath until my ribs ached, then let the runner fall back into place before anyone noticed the tremor in my hand. "Mom, you outdid yourself," my son said, reaching for the chicken. "This looks amazing." "It's your favorite," I managed, my voice lined with something I hoped sounded like happiness. "Roasted the way Dad liked it." Across from me, my daughter-in-law folded her napkin on her lap, an elegant triangle she smoothed with careful fingers. "You always make everything so memorable," she said, the compliment satiny on the surface, hard beneath. She glanced at the runner, then back to me with a look I couldn't read. It was the look you give a locked door when you know where the spare key is hidden. My heart pounded against the discovery until it found a rhythm that matched the little red blink I could not unsee. I poured water for everyone, set down the pitcher, and forced my hands into stillness. I heard my husband's voice in my head, "Steady on, Em," like the way he used to talk me through storms on I-95. Wipers losing to sheets of rain. "Grandma, the rolls," my grandson said, reaching. I split one open, and steam sighed out, threading the air with butter. "Careful, baby," I said, sliding it to his plate. My son watched me with that torn expression he'd been wearing lately, as if he were trying to hold 2 homes inside one ribcage and could feel the splinters. "Do you want more salad?" my daughter-in-law asked him, too sweet, too attentive, the way a salesperson leans on your shoulder just past comfortable. She kept her tone casual, but her eyes kept flicking, briefly, surgically, toward the table's edge. If I hadn't known what lay under the runner, I might have missed it. I knew now. And knowing pressed on my chest. I tested myself like a tightrope walker taking the first step. "You've both been busy," I said lightly. "How's work, Eliza?" I asked her. "Still doing those late nights?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and gave me a smile that didn't crack her lipstick. "You know how it is," she said. "Lots of deadlines, lots of coordination." The word lingered, and I felt the air thin, as if the walls listened. In my head, I paced the borders of panic, searching for an exit that wouldn't collapse the room. I imagined my words pouring into that pinhole, clipped, trimmed, fed to whatever device waited in her purse or in her car or on her phone. I imagined my voice shorn of context. I missed the old ways, maybe, turned into a manifesto I never wrote. I thought of the times she'd pushed a conversation toward delicate places, my parenting, my money, the house, then smiled when I deflected. Maybe deflection had been the footage she wanted all along. Maybe tonight the footage needed spice. "Mom, you okay?" my son asked, a frown folding his forehead. He was always the one to notice the hairline fractures. "I'm fine," I said, picking up my fork with what I hoped was grandmotherly poise. Just remembering your father carving this chicken like it was an art. He'd cut little pieces for you and call them golden tickets. My grandson giggled, and the memory pulled a soft laugh from my son too, the kind that bridges and breaks you in the same breath. Eliza tilted her head. It must be hard being here without him, she said, voice sympathetic at the edges. Sometimes habits outlive people. She reached for her water. The glass tapped the runner, a whisper against the hidden device. I swallowed. Habits can be anchors, I said. They keep you from drifting when the tide's not in your favor. She nodded, eyes bright. Or they weigh you down. The candle flame wavered as if a window had opened. I cut a bite of chicken, tasted rosemary and lemon, and the metallic trace of fear. I wanted to yank the runner back, rip the tape up, hold the tiny mic aloft like a captured wasp. I wanted to ask why she'd turned my home into an interrogation room. I wanted to see if my son would hear the question as an accusation or a plea. But I also wanted to know what she thought she could catch, what script she believed I would read if she fed me the right cue. I took the safer road, at least for now. Eliza, I said, soft as linen. Did you end up trying that lemon pie recipe I sent? The one with the graham cracker crust? Her smile sharpened a fraction. I did, she said, and then, a beat later, I recorded it. The word snagged, small and enormous at once. My son didn't flinch, but his fork paused midair. You recorded the recipe? He asked, teasing, trying to pull us back to breezy. Of course, she said. For my notes. She took a bite of salad, eyes flicking down, then up. You can forget things if you don't. Keep track. In the lengthening quiet, my grandson's spoon made a steady, metallic rain on his plate. I smiled at him, then at my son, and finally at the woman who had tucked a stranger into my table's belly. I folded my napkin once, twice like her, and placed it neatly on my lap. Inside me, something braced and stood. I would not be baited tonight. Not by flattery, not by grief, not by the red blink pulsing under wood, worn smooth by years of family meals. I would learn what she wanted, and why, and how far she was willing to push. I would choose my words the way a surgeon chooses incisions, precise, sparing, unforgiving where they must be. Then let's make this a dinner worth remembering, I said, lifting my glass, and watch the slightest tremor ripple her smile as the runner ruffled with the breeze of my hand. Because if she wanted a script, she was about to learn I didn't do rehearsals, and I had just discovered my audience. Before that dinner, before the glint under the runner split the air open, I used to tell myself that building a bridge with Eliza just needed time. She was young, ambitious, a little sharp around the edges. But who isn't when they're still trying to prove their place in the world? When my son brought her home 5 years ago, she wore her determination like perfume, strong enough to fill the room, impossible to ignore. At first, I admired it. My son had always been cautious, careful with money, careful with words, careful with feelings. She was different, bold, outspoken, with opinions that flared like fireworks at Sunday dinners. When she laughed, he seemed to stand taller. I thought maybe she was what he needed, the spark to his steady flame. We lived in a quiet suburb, 2-story houses with neat lawns and mailboxes painted in patriotic red, white, and blue. After my husband passed, the house became too big, but it was where every memory breathed. I wanted to keep it alive, not just for me, but for my son, too. Eliza, though, never hid her distaste. This place feels dated, she said once, running her manicured finger along my floral wallpaper. We should modernize it. I'd echoed, not sure if she realized this was still my home, my mortgage, my sweat layered into the walls. She smiled as if she hadn't heard me. It would be perfect for an open concept. Tear this wall down, brighten everything, don't you think? My son cleared his throat. Eliza. But he didn't finish. He never did, not when she talked like that. I told myself it was nerves, new marriage, trying too hard. I bought her birthday gifts, perfume, silk scarves, a cookbook she once mentioned. I invited her to help in the kitchen, to share recipes, to bake pies together. She often declined, busy with work deadlines, yet complained to my son that I wasn't making an effort. One evening, I overheard them whispering in the hallway. "She doesn't like me, Daniel. I can feel it." "That's not true. Mom's just traditional," he whispered back. "She judges me every second." "No, she doesn't." "Then why do I feel like a guest in your house instead of family?" The words landed heavy, even though I wasn't supposed to hear them. I retreated to the kitchen, slicing apples too thin for a pie I didn't want anymore. Still, I kept trying. Family mattered. My grandson, especially, was the golden thread holding us all together. When he toddled into my arms, sticky with jam and babbling nonsense, I believed the tension could melt. I wanted him to grow up with warmth, not suspicion, to think of Sunday dinners as something sacred, not staged. But small cracks kept appearing. Eliza's compliments sounded rehearsed. Her smiles carried edges. She brought wine bottles priced high enough to impress, but always with labels turned just so, like advertisements. And then there were her little tests. She'd ask me questions that seemed innocent on the surface. "Do you ever worry Daniel married too quickly? How did you really feel about him moving out?" And I'd give vague, neutral answers, but she never looked satisfied. She looked like someone fishing for a line she could reel in later. I brushed it off as insecurity. Everyone has their battles, I told myself. She just needed to know she belonged. Maybe if I opened myself more, she'd see I wasn't her rival. That's why I suggested the family dinner that night. I spent hours cooking his favorite meal, laying out the good china, ironing napkins until they were crisp. I wanted peace to start at my table, as it always had. When Eliza arrived, her heels clicked like punctuation marks on the hardwood. She greeted me warmly, almost too warmly. "Smells wonderful, Mom," she said, the word rolling off her tongue as if she'd practiced it in the mirror. I swallowed my doubts and let the hope rise in me. Maybe, I thought, this was the turning point. Maybe she'd finally lower her guard, let us share something real. I had no idea that under the very table where I laid out roasted chicken and candles, she'd hidden something waiting to catch me off guard. I only wanted to bond. She wanted evidence. And that difference, the chasm between those two desires, was about to split my family open. The shift began slowly, so slowly I almost convinced myself it wasn't happening. Eliza's comments didn't stab. They pricked, little pinholes in the fabric of our family life. "Your cooking is so traditional," she'd say, swirling her fork in mashed potatoes. Or, "Daniel loves modern furniture, doesn't he?" I guess he never had the chance to explore that growing up. She spoke lightly, with the brightness of casual observation, but every word landed in me like a pebble dropped into water, ripples spreading, unsettling. My son never caught it, or maybe he did, but chose not to. He'd grin awkwardly, change the subject, refill glasses. I used to think marriage was compromise. Now I wondered if compromise looked like swallowing words you wanted to defend, words about your own mother. The house became her canvas of critique. "It feels dark in here," she mused one evening, brushing dustless blinds. A shame you never updated the windows. Natural light makes such a difference. I smiled tight. Your generation loves open spaces. Mine liked cozy ones. She tilted her head, pitying. Cozy or cramped? Daniel coughed into his napkin. My grandson drummed on the table, oblivious. Later that night, I asked him quietly, do you think she's right? That the house feels cramped? He looked torn. Mom, it's just her style. She likes things sleek. Don't take it personally. But how could I not? These walls weren't just walls. They were my husband's handiwork, our life built board by board. Every critique sounded like erasure. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was old-fashioned. Maybe I did cling too tightly. I baked more, hosted more, tried harder. I told myself if I gave her enough kindness, it would soften her edges. But kindness, I was beginning to learn, can be seen as weakness by someone who's looking for leverage. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped me at the mailbox. Your daughter-in-law is spirited, she said carefully. What do you mean? I asked, shielding my eyes from the sun. She mentioned at the park that you're a bit controlling, that it's hard for Daniel to have space. My heart stuttered. Controlling? She probably didn't mean it harshly. The neighbor offered a sympathetic smile. But it didn't sound very kind. I walked back into the house with the letters trembling in my hand. Controlling. The word felt heavy, like a verdict. I replayed every dinner, every suggestion I'd made, every time I'd offered advice. Was I overstepping? Or was she planting an image of me that didn't match the truth? That evening, when they came for supper, I tried to measure every word. But Eliza leaned in, her tone sugar smooth. Daniel, remember when your mom used to make you do chores before playing ball? You always said it made you resentful. He frowned slightly. I don't remember saying resentful. She laughed. Oh, you did. I recall it so well. I froze, spoon halfway to my plate. It wasn't just what she said. It was the way she claimed authority over his memories, reshaping them while he nodded in uncertainty. After they left, I sat in the quiet house, lights dimmed, my plate still half full. My mind reeled. Was she just careless with words, or was she testing boundaries, seeing how far she could bend reality before it snapped? I told myself again, she just wants to belong. Don't overthink. But when I closed my eyes, I heard her voice, steady, rehearsed. I pictured that little red light blinking under the runner. She had been preparing. The breaking point came at another dinner, weeks before the mic incident. We sat with dessert. Lemon pie she said was too tart. She asked casually, so, how do you really feel about Daniel supporting us financially one day? Do you expect to live here until the end? I blinked. This is my home. I've paid every bill, every tax. Why would I expect him to? She smiled. I'm just curious. People talk about inheritance differently these days. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Eliza? I'm only saying, we should plan. Families fight about these things. Her words slithered into my chest. Plan, inheritance, families fight. I looked at my son, but he avoided my gaze, cutting into the pie like it might rescue him. That night, as I washed dishes, I told myself she was practical, just planning ahead. But another part of me whispered, she's laying groundwork. Every remark, every twist of memory, every sly question, it's preparation. I didn't know then how much preparation. I didn't know she was sharpening her tools, waiting to use them against me. And as much as I tried to ignore it, some instinct in me, buried deep, began to stir. This wasn't just tension. It was strategy. The week after that dinner, the unease followed me like a shadow. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe the glint under the runner had been nothing. Maybe Eliza's pointed questions were simply curiosity. But then Daniel showed up at my door one evening, his expression caught somewhere between concern and accusation. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked, standing stiff in the doorway, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "Of course," I said, letting him in. The smell of pot roast filled the kitchen, the kind of smell that used to make him come home smiling. But he didn't smile now. He sat at the table, shoulders tense. "Eliza told me something," he began. "She said you've been critical, that you think she's not good enough. She said you told her you wish I'd married someone more like Dad's side of the family." My heart stuttered. "I never said that." "She has it recorded, Mom." His voice was heavy, like each word hurt. "She played it for me. Your voice, clear as day." The air thinned. My mind scrambled back to the blinking light. A recording. My words, clipped and spliced, served to him like poisoned bread. "What did you hear exactly?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She played a clip of you saying, 'I wish Daniel had chosen better.'" He swallowed hard. "Mom, how could you?" I felt my legs weaken. I gripped the table edge until my knuckles ached. "Daniel, I never said that. Not like that. She twisted something. You know me. You know I'd never speak that way about you." He rubbed his temples. "I don't know what to think. It sounded so real." "Because she wanted it to," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "She's setting me up." He stood suddenly, pacing. "Mom, don't make this about her." I bit my lip, tasting iron. This was worse than anger. It was doubt. The kind of doubt that plants itself deep and grows until it cracks everything open. When he left, the house echoed with silence. I sank into the chair where he had sat and buried my face in my hands. The thought of her feeding him my own words, warped, weaponized, made my stomach twist. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every conversation replayed in my head. The lemon pie dinner, the little questions, the glances toward the table. She'd been collecting fragments, waiting for her chance. And now, she had given him a version of me that wasn't real. 2 days later, my neighbor, Mrs. Green, stopped me at the grocery store. "I heard about your comments," she said, adjusting her glasses. "What comments?" "Eliza mentioned you said Daniel deserved better. I told her I couldn't believe that, but..." She trailed off, apologetic. The ground tilted beneath me. It wasn't just Daniel. She was spreading this image everywhere. A careful campaign, one clip at a time. When I got home, I pulled out my old journals. Page after page, my handwriting testified to years of devotion. Notes about Daniel's soccer games, recipes I perfected for his birthdays, letters to my late husband about our boys' milestones. I wasn't the woman she painted me to be. But how could I prove that against the cold certainty of a recording? The next dinner, I decided to test her. I spoke deliberately, weaving phrases that sounded sharp out of context, but harmless whole. "You know, some people think children these days are too indulged," I said casually. Eliza's eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the runner. 2 nights later, Daniel called. His voice was clipped. "Mom, why would you say our son is indulged? He's just a child." My chest tightened. "I said some people think that, not me." Eliza played me the recording. I closed my eyes. The trap was sprung. Every word I spoke at my own table was being fed through her filter, turned against me. She wasn't trying to bond. She was building a case. That night, I sat alone with the dishes. The candle stubs melted to wax puddles. The table, once a sanctuary of family, now felt like an ambush site. I touched the runner, fingertips grazing the hidden tape beneath, and whispered to the empty room. "What do you want from me, Eliza?" The silence didn't answer. But I knew. She wanted me silenced, discredited, erased. And if I didn't act soon, I would lose my son. Not to death, but to doubt. I thought things couldn't sink lower than Daniel doubting me. But betrayal has layers, each one thinner and sharper than the last. It started with a phone call. My friend Carol from church lowered her voice, as though sharing a secret too fragile for the air. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I heard Eliza's been talking to a divorce lawyer. She mentioned custody. Custody! The word echoed like a bell tolling. I gripped the receiver. Custody of what? They only have... My voice faltered. My grandson's face swam before my eyes. His laugh, his sticky fingers clutching mine, the way he called me Nana, with a sweetness that patched cracks in my grief. Custody of the boy, Carol said gently. And she's been suggesting you're not a safe influence. Something about recordings. My knees gave out. I sank onto the kitchen chair, staring at the phone cord like it might strangle me. Recordings? Carol hesitated. She implied you've said things, cruel things. I know it's not true, but she's painting a picture. I hung up and sat there long after the dial tone vanished, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My grandson. She wanted to take him from Daniel, and she was using me to do it. If she could prove I was unfit, toxic, dangerous, then she could argue Daniel would expose the boy to harm by keeping me in his life. That night, I tried to keep myself calm for bedtime. Daniel dropped my grandson off while he and Eliza went out. As I tucked the boy into bed, he looked up at me with solemn eyes, far too old for his little face. "Grandma," he whispered, "why do you say bad things about Mommy?" The words pierced me. "Sweetheart, I've never said bad things about your mommy." "Yes, you did. Mommy played it for me." He rolled over, pulling the blanket to his chin. "You said you don't like her." My throat closed. She was showing him the recordings, poisoning him too. I kissed his forehead, but inside, my heart cracked in two. When Daniel came to pick him up, I wanted to scream, to tell him she was coaching his son against me. Instead, I stood in the doorway, silent, watching Eliza buckle him into the car seat with meticulous precision. She caught my eye, her smile just a fraction too tight. Triumph glittered there, as if she knew exactly what she'd done. After they drove away, I collapsed against the doorframe. I felt like an intruder in my own life, every word I'd ever spoken now a potential weapon. In the days that followed, the tension sharpened. Eliza's messages to me were clipped, overly polite. She sent emails instead of speaking in person, almost as though she was building a paper trail. "Thank you for watching him Tuesday, but please do not give him sweets after 8. I'd appreciate it if you didn't share stories about Daniel's childhood. It confuses him." Rules, boundaries, all neatly worded, all implying that I was reckless, irresponsible. I began to realize this wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. I confided in Mrs. Green one evening while watering my roses. She nodded gravely. "She's trying to isolate you, Em. If she can convince Daniel you're dangerous, she'll have more leverage in court. Custody battles can be ugly. I've seen neighbors torn apart by less." I hugged my cardigan tighter around me. But what if Daniel believes her? What if I lose not just him, but my grandson too? Her eyes softened. "Then you'll need proof. The truth won't defend itself." That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, journals and photo albums spread around me. I flipped through pictures. My son at 5, grinning with 2 missing teeth. My grandson at 2, frosting smeared across his cheeks. Love was written in every line of my life. Yet love felt powerless against manipulation recorded in cold, clipped audio. The weight of it pressed into me. Eliza wasn't just trying to turn Daniel against me. She was trying to erase me from my grandson's life altogether. And she was willing to use lies, spliced words, and coached phrases from a child's mouth to do it. I closed the albums and whispered to the empty house, "You will not take him from me." For the first time in months, resolve replaced despair. I realized this wasn't just about defending myself. It was about fighting for the boy who still reached for my hand, even when confusion clouded his eyes. And if Eliza wanted a war built on recordings, then I would need to learn how to make the truth louder than her lies. The morning after that sleepless night, I brewed coffee so strong it tasted like burnt earth, but I needed it to steady my trembling hands. The kitchen window framed a world that seemed ordinary. Kids biking to school, mailman strolling his route, the sun breaking through clouds. But nothing was ordinary anymore. My home, my words, even my grandson's trust had become fragile things Eliza could twist at will. I knew then, if I kept playing defense, I'd lose. I called Carol first. She was the kind of friend who never judged, the kind who still brought me casseroles on my husband's birthday. "Carol," I whispered, as though Eliza might be listening through the phone lines. "I think she's trying to destroy me." "You're not crazy, Em," Carol said firmly. "I've seen women like her before. Everything's a performance. If she's taping you, you'll need something stronger than denial. You'll need proof she's the one manipulating." The word proof echoed in my mind long after we hung up. That afternoon, I dusted off my husband's old camcorder from the attic. The thing was bulky, outdated, but it still worked. I set it up in the corner of the dining room where it blended into the shadows. If she wanted to record me, maybe I could record her. Days passed, tense and brittle. Eliza kept visiting. Her smiles lacquered on, her words carefully chosen. I mirrored her politeness, even as I watched her eyes dart toward the runner, checking her hidden device. I let conversations drift into safe waters, but once or twice, I dropped odd phrases, nonsense sentences designed to make no sense out of context. If those words resurfaced from Daniel's mouth later, I would know exactly where they came from. At night, I wrote everything down in my journal. Every comment she made, every look, every rule-filled email she sent. It became a ledger, a quiet record of her campaign against me. But the real crack came not from my own efforts, but from my grandson. One evening, while coloring at the table, he muttered, "Mommy said I should say you don't like her." He pressed a crayon too hard, breaking the tip. My breath caught. "She told you to say that?" He nodded, eyes still on the page. "She said it's just a game." I felt my chest tighten with equal parts rage and sorrow. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you don't have to say anything that isn't true. Do you understand?" He shrugged. "Okay." But his little shoulders carried more weight than any child's should. That night, after they left, I replayed the camcorder footage. It was grainy, the sound muffled, but there it was, her voice, coaxing, low but clear. "Just remember what I told you. Say Nana doesn't like me, okay?" My hands shook as I rewound it again and again, disbelief fighting with relief. Proof. Finally, something real. I took the tape to a lawyer recommended by Carol. His office smelled of leather and old books, walls lined with certificates. He leaned back, listening as I explained everything. My son's doubt, the doctored recordings, the custody threat. Then I showed him the footage. He raised his eyebrows. This is strong. Coaching a child is a serious matter. Judges don't look kindly on manipulation like this. I swallowed hard. But what about her recordings? She'll use them against me. He leaned forward. If they're spliced or out of context, we can challenge their authenticity. Forensic experts can detect tampering. You've been on the defensive too long. Now you've got leverage. Leverage. I clung to the word like a rope thrown into a storm. When I left his office, the air outside felt different, crisper, cleaner. For the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely powerless. The war wasn't over, but at least I had a weapon. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, journal open beside me, camcorder humming in the corner. I thought of my husband, of how he always said, "Don't let anyone write your story but you." Maybe Eliza had tried to script me as the villain, but I wasn't finished writing. When Daniel came by later to drop off my grandson, I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Son," I said softly, "there are things you need to see. Not tonight, but soon. And when you do, I hope you'll remember who I've always been to you." He looked uncertain, weary, but he nodded. "Okay, Mom." As the door closed behind him, I knew the battle was far from won. But for the first time, I felt something stir inside me that Eliza hadn't counted on. Strength. And I intended to use it. The table had always been my battleground, so I chose it again. I roasted chicken just the way Daniel liked, laid out fresh rolls, and polished the silver until it caught candlelight. This time, though, I wasn't hoping for peace. This time, I was ready. When they arrived, Eliza's perfume filled the hallway first. Sharp, expensive, a little suffocating. She kissed Daniel's cheek, then bent down to unbuckle my grandson from his car seat, all tender smiles. She walked in with a casserole dish she hadn't cooked, bought from the store, wrapped in foil. "Thought I'd contribute," she said brightly. I forced a smile. "How thoughtful." Dinner began with small talk. Daniel chatted about work deadlines. Eliza chimed in about redecorating ideas for their place. My grandson clattered his spoon, giggling at nothing. To anyone else, it looked like a perfectly ordinary family dinner. But I kept my eyes on Eliza, watching the flicker in her gaze. Those quick glances toward the runner, like a thief checking the door behind her. Halfway through the meal, she made her move. "So, Em," she said, her voice smooth as cream, "do you ever regret how you raised Daniel? I mean, you were very strict, weren't you?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Eliza—" "No, it's a fair question," she pressed, eyes glittering. "Some people might call that controlling." I set down my fork. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. "Strict? Perhaps. But regret?" I tilted my head. "No, not for a second." She leaned back, disappointment flickering for just a breath. I knew what she wanted, a slip, a phrase she could carve out later. But tonight, the script was mine. I reached for my phone, already synced to the camcorder footage. With one quiet tap, the dining room filled with grainy audio. "Just remember what I told you. Say Nana doesn't like me, okay?" The voice was unmistakable. Eliza's. My grandson froze, his spoon midair. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. Eliza went pale, her polished composure cracking like porcelain dropped on tile. That's out of context," she stammered. Daniel turned to her, eyes wide. "You told our son to say that?" "No, he misunderstood." The tape continued, damning in its clarity. "It's just a game. Tell Daddy Nana makes you sad." Silence swallowed the room when the audio ended. Only the candle flames flickered, tall and accusing. I folded my hands in my lap. "You've been recording me for months, Eliza. Twisting my words, telling Daniel lies, coaching my grandson to hate me. I kept quiet because I wanted peace, but peace isn't built on deceit. Daniel's face drained of color. He looked at me, then at her, torn in ways I'd never seen. Eliza, is this true? Her lips parted, but no words came. She pushed back from the table, her chair screeching against the floor. You don't understand, she snapped. She's manipulative. She's been trying to turn you against me since day one. Daniel shook his head slowly. You told our son to lie about his grandmother. His voice cracked. How could you do that? I was protecting us, she shouted, her composure gone now, raw edges exposed. She's toxic. You don't see it because you're blind to her. She'll control you forever if you let her. I looked at my son, my eyes burning. Daniel, I have made mistakes in my life, but I would never, never use your child as a weapon. He stared at the table, the truth warring with the loyalty he'd sworn to his wife. Then he pushed his chair back and stood. I need air, he muttered, leaving the room. Eliza followed him, heels striking sharp against the floor. My grandson looked at me, frightened. I gathered him into my arms, whispering, It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. But my heart knew this wasn't over. From the hallway, their voices rose, angry, frantic. Eliza insisting, Daniel demanding answers. Every word was another crack in the marriage I had once hoped would bring my son happiness. When they finally left that night, Daniel didn't meet my eyes. Eliza's face was tight with rage, her lips pressed so thin they seemed bloodless. As the door closed behind them, I leaned against the wood, exhaustion flooding me. I had shown him the truth, but whether he would accept it or turn away, I didn't yet know. One thing was certain, Eliza wasn't finished. If anything, she would strike back harder. And the next battleground wouldn't be my dining room. It would be the courtroom. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old wood, like a place where too many secrets had been scrubbed clean, but never really gone. I sat on the hard bench, palms pressed to my knees to still their trembling. Daniel was beside me, eyes fixed straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. Eliza sat on the opposite side of the aisle, immaculate in a tailored navy suit, her hair smoothed into perfection. She didn't look at me, not once, but I could feel her presence, sharp as glass. The judge entered, robes swishing, and the room rose. My heart thudded in my chest. This wasn't just about Daniel and Eliza's divorce anymore. It was about custody, about whether my grandson would grow up believing his grandmother was poison. Eliza's lawyer spoke first, voice honeyed but cutting. Your Honor, we have recordings that demonstrate a pattern of emotional manipulation and hostility from Mrs. Emerson toward my client. These prove she is an unfit influence on the child. I kept my face still, though inside, panic threatened to unravel me. The lawyer pressed play. My own voice filled the courtroom. I wish Daniel had chosen better. Out of context, sliced from some longer conversation. The sound of my voice, distorted by omission, stabbed like a knife. Daniel glanced at me, hurt flickering across his features before he forced himself neutral again. Then my lawyer stood. Your Honor, we believe these recordings are not only manipulated, but deliberately altered. We've brought an audio forensics expert to testify. The expert was a thin man with spectacles that magnified his eyes. He leaned over the microphone, explaining waveforms, unnatural cuts, and digital splicing. On a screen, he projected the visual patterns of sound, showing jagged breaks where sentences had been fused. These recordings are not continuous, he concluded. They have been tampered with. The judge's brow furrowed. Are you certain? As certain as one can be with audio evidence, It is clear these clips have been edited. A murmur rippled through the room. Eliza's jaw tightened, her manicured nails tapping against the table. But the real blow came when my lawyer pressed play on the camcorder tape, the one I had captured at my dining table. Grainy though it was, the words were undeniable. "Just remember what I told you. Say Nana doesn't like me, okay?" The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Then the recording continued. "It's just a game. Tell Daddy Nana makes you sad." Gasps broke out. The judge raised a hand for order. Daniel's face went white, his mouth parting as though air had fled his lungs. Eliza shifted in her seat, a sheen of sweat suddenly visible at her hairline. "Mrs. Emerson," the judge said sharply, turning toward her. "Is this your voice?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. For the first time since this ordeal began, she looked small, cornered. Then my grandson was called to the stand. My heart clenched as his tiny legs dangled from the witness chair, a stuffed bear clutched in his lap. The bailiff swore him in as gently as possible. "Do you know the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie?" the judge asked kindly. He nodded. "Truth means real. And did anyone ever ask you to say things about your grandmother that weren't real?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward his mother. Eliza's gaze was laser-sharp, a silent command. But then he looked at me. I mouthed, "It's okay." His little voice wavered. "Mommy told me to say Grandma doesn't like her. But Grandma never said that." The room erupted. The judge banged his gavel for order, but nothing could erase the sound of that child's truth cutting through the lies. I blinked back tears, gripping the edge of the bench so hard my fingers ached. Relief, sorrow, pride, they all collided in me at once. My grandson, forced into a role no child should bear, had spoken the truth anyway. The judge leaned back, eyes grave. "This court will not tolerate manipulation of a child. Mrs. Emerson, these allegations against your mother-in-law are unfounded. Your custody case is severely compromised by your conduct." Eliza's face crumpled, rage flickering, but she held it in check under the weight of the courtroom's eyes. When we walked out into the crisp air afterward, Daniel's steps were heavy, his silence thicker than words. Finally, he stopped on the courthouse steps, staring at the ground. "Mom," he whispered. I didn't want to believe it, but now I can't ignore it anymore. I touched his arm, my throat tight. "The truth always comes out, son. Sometimes it just needs a little help." And though the war wasn't entirely over, I felt the tide shift beneath my feet. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I was standing. The courthouse emptied slowly, footsteps echoing against the marble floors. I lingered by the doors, my hand resting on the cool brass handle, waiting for Daniel. He stood a few feet away, his head bowed, shoulders slumped, as though years had settled on him all at once. Eliza paced like a cornered animal, her heels striking the floor too sharply, her eyes darting anywhere but at me. When the crowd thinned, Daniel finally turned to her. "Why?" His voice was raw, stripped of patience, stripped of love. Eliza froze. "Why what? Why did you lie? Why did you drag Mom into this? Why did you make our son lie?" His words spilled out like broken glass, sharp and cutting. Her lips trembled, then curled into a sneer. "Because she's toxic, Daniel. She's always been toxic. Can't you see how she controls you? She still treats you like a child, and you let her. I was trying to protect us." I felt my heart pound, but I said nothing. This was his battle now. Daniel shook his head. "Protect us? By destroying my own mother? By turning our son against her? That's not protection, Eliza. That's cruelty." Her face hardened. "You're blind. She's poisoned you." And if you think I'll let her ruin our family, you're wrong. He stepped closer, his voice lower but fiercer. No, Eliza. You ruined it, not her. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw clarity in his eyes. The fog of doubt, the hesitation, the confusion, it had burned away, leaving only truth. Eliza's composure cracked. She reached for his arm, desperate now. Daniel, listen. He pulled back. Don't touch me. His voice wavered, but his resolve didn't. I can forgive a lot, Eliza. But using our son, manipulating him like that I'll never forgive. Her mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I remembered the blinking light under my table, my grandson's confused little voice, the nights I spent questioning my sanity. Pity evaporated. Daniel turned to me then, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, he whispered, I'm so sorry for doubting you, for letting this go on so long. My throat tightened. I wanted to embrace him, to tell him none of it mattered, that he was still my boy. But all I could manage was, You see me now. That's enough. Eliza's voice rose again, shrill with desperation. You're making a mistake. She'll smother you, Daniel. She'll smother him too. You'll regret this. Daniel's jaw clenched. The only mistake I made was trusting you. And then he walked away. She stood frozen, fury etched across her face, but powerless now. She had built her case carefully, brick by brick, only for it to collapse under the weight of her own lies. Her heels clicked violently as she stormed past me, her perfume sharp and bitter in the air. For once, I didn't flinch. Outside, the sky was wide and bright, the kind of sky my husband used to call honest weather. Daniel stood beside me, hands shoved into his pockets, staring out at nothing. My grandson tugged at my skirt, holding his bear close, his eyes searching mine. I knelt and smoothed his hair back. It's all right, sweetheart, I murmured. You don't have to play any games anymore. He nodded solemnly, as if he understood more than a child ever should. For a moment, the three of us just stood there, the mother, the son, the grandson, on the courthouse steps, bound together not by peace yet, but by truth. And truth was enough to tip the balance. As Eliza's car screeched out of the parking lot, Daniel exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. It feels like I'm waking up from a nightmare, he said softly. You are, I told him. And nightmares can't last forever. His hand found mine, tentative but steady. And in that fragile moment, I knew we were no longer divided by lies. The truth had burned away the fog, leaving us scarred, but together. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that healing wouldn't come quickly. Trust once broken doesn't snap back whole. It has to be rebuilt, brick by careful brick. Still, I looked at my son, at my grandson clutching my hand, and thought, we've survived the fire. Now maybe we can begin again. The weeks that followed felt quieter, as if the storm had finally passed and left behind an uneasy calm. Eliza moved out of their house. Her absence felt not just in Daniel's life, but in the rhythm of our family. Papers were filed, lawyers sent letters back and forth, and though the legal machinery ground on, the sharp edge of her presence no longer pressed against me. At first, Daniel came around sparingly, hesitant, as though ashamed of the scars left behind. But every time he showed up, he lingered longer. One evening, he helped me fix the leaky faucet, fumbling with the wrench the way his father used to. Another afternoon, he brought groceries and insisted on cooking dinner, though his chicken was dry and the rice burned. We laughed anyway, and in that laughter, I felt the first stitch in a torn fabric. My grandson came often too, bounding into the house with crayons and toy trucks, his laughter bouncing off the walls. The shadows of confusion still lingered in his eyes sometimes. But children heal faster than adults. He still reached for my hand, still begged me to tell him stories about when his daddy was small. Each bedtime tale felt like reclaiming ground I thought I'd lost forever. One Sunday, I invited them both for dinner. The oak table gleamed, candles flickered, and the smell of rosemary chicken once again filled the air. But this time, there were no hidden devices, no blinking lights under the runner. Just 3 plates, 3 forks, and the sound of family. As we ate, Daniel finally spoke what had been weighing on him. "Mom," he said, his voice thick, "I can't take back the months I doubted you. I can't erase what she did. But I want to rebuild what we lost. If you'll let me." I set my fork down and looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the little boy I raised, but he wasn't a stranger either. He was a man caught between 2 worlds, and for a time he had chosen the wrong one. But he was here now. That was what mattered. "You never lost me," I said softly. "You just forgot where home was for a while." His eyes shone, and he reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Warm, steady, real. Later, after dishes were washed and my grandson tucked into bed, I found myself alone at the table. The candle had burned low, wax dripping down in rivers, pooling on the brass holder. I lifted the runner, fingers brushing the smooth wood underneath. No tape, no mic, just the grain of oak, worn by decades of meals, arguments, laughter, and prayers. I thought of my husband, of the nights he carved chicken for us, calling little slices golden tickets. I thought of the lies that had nearly broken us, of the moment truth cracked open in a courtroom, and of the tiny voice of my grandson saying, "Grandma never said that." Betrayal had walked into my home wearing perfume and polished heels, but it had left stripped and exposed. I had been tested in ways I never imagined, my words twisted, my love questioned, my bond with my son nearly severed. And yet, I was still here. Not perfect, not unscarred, but standing. The redemption wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was in the quiet, the soft click of Daniel locking the door behind him when he came to visit, the small hand of my grandson slipping into mine during prayers, the silence under the dining table where once a red light blinked. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the weight of it all settle into something lighter. The world outside still held chaos, betrayal, and loss, but inside this home, the air was clear again. When I blew out the last candle, smoke curled upward, twisting, rising, then fading into nothing. And I whispered to the dark, more to myself than anyone else. Trust can break, but love can be rebuilt. The house exhaled with me, as though it too was finally at peace.